My name is Tobias Degsell and I'm the founder of the Combiner. I also, as you said, used to be the curator for the Nobel Prize Museum. They actually changed the name so people could understand what it's all about. Because if you just call it Nobel, people outside Scandinavia, they miss out what Nobel is all about, but it's about the Nobel Prize. If you work within the Nobel system, you are not allowed to call them Nobel Prize winners. And there's a very good reason for that. Because if we start calling those people Nobel Prize winners, then the rest of us who didn't get the Nobel Prize, what are we then? Losers? No, of course not. So you use the term Nobel laureates because it's not about winning and losing, it's about pushing the envelope. And those people receiving the Nobel Prize, they have pushed the envelope and they have been part of creating a better world. And if you compare the world today with the world in 1901 when they started handing out the Nobel Prize, the world today is a much better place due to the fact that those people has pushed the envelope. So I'm going to speak about data. You have probably heard that you should feel passion for what you're doing. I think passion is too weak. It's not about passion, it's about obsession. To be truly successful, you need to be obsessed. But the problem with obsession is that then collaboration becomes even more important because obsessive people tend to jump into every rabbit hole there is. And you need people or friends that can come and grab you in the ears and pull you up. But you need those kind of people that are truly obsessed. And I was always obsessed with data. When I was a young kid, I collected data from different things. Then I started working for the Nobel Prize Foundation. And then I collected, of course, all the Nobel Prize laureates. Today, when I'm not working for the Nobel anymore, I do 4 keynote presentations every month. And when you travel as much as I do, sometimes people tell me, can you send us a picture and we'll send someone to the airport or to the train station and pick you up? And then I always send people this picture. This is my brain. I truly love data. I have a background in linguistics, so for many years I was sitting at university and I was analyzing grammatical structures. I majored in Scandinavian languages, Swedish dialects of northern Swedish names of plants, and I was counting all those words, how many of the words are ending with an ER, with an OR, with an S, and then I created very complex systems until the university kicked me out. Then I started working for the company Apple, and they told me that they are also obsessed with data. And big data is great, because if you have big data, you can understand when to do things and how to do things. But something that you will never get from the data is why. You need to decide on the why before you start digging into the data. And a lot of organizations, they think, okay, give us data and then the answer will come to us. That's not the thing. You need to understand what you will do with the data, and then you can start analyzing it. Because it's actually not about just collecting data. You don't want to end up becoming like a data hoarder. You want to use the data. You need to implement and to see and how to connect it. And if you take the Nobel Prize, for example, this is a perfect picture. I totally love this. This is the most intelligent photo ever taken. It's a similar conference to the conference that we are attending today. A lot of smart people. This was taken many, many years ago in 1929. It's in Belgium, in a place called Solvay. There are like 29 people in this picture. Out of them, 17 received a Nobel Prize. So in the same picture, you have Albert Einstein, but you also have Marie Curie, or if someone from Poland, you could call her Maria Sklodowska. And you have Schrödinger, and you have Heisenberg. And when I started working for the Nobel, because I'm not a typical museum guy, when they offered me the position working for the Nobel Museum, I turned it down and said, I don't want to work in a museum, I'm too young. I think that museums often are very, very boring. Then I realized that the Nobel Prize is all about data and understanding on how to put the data into different things. So when I started working there, I accessed all the information from all the Nobel Prize laureates. I started analyzing it, and I wanted to see patterns, what things connect and what didn't connect. And one very clear thing that I understood quite early was that there is one thing that connects each and every Nobel laureate, and that is creativity. So for many years, when I was still working for the Nobel, I was traveling the world and I was speaking about the connection between Nobel Prize, creativity and innovation. And I held presentations for big universities, but also for companies. And I always ask the same question. Do you think innovation and creativity is important for your industry? And everyone told me, yes, of course, it's super important. And then I told people, well, I have a background in linguistics, and I'm fairly stupid. I actually don't get this word. Can please someone define what this is? And then people became very quiet. And someone maybe after a while became brave and they said, you know, it's about thinking differently, thinking outside the box. Have you heard that expression? It's not about thinking outside the box. Because when I was working for the Swedish Central Bank, for example, for the Department for Money Laundry, and we were driving change and innovation, we were speaking about creativity, and they told me we can't think outside the box because there are so many regulations. I said, no, it's not about thinking outside the box, it's thinking inside the box. You need some kind of boundaries. And then when you have established the boundaries, then you can start breaking some of those. You shouldn't break all of it, but maybe some of those boundaries could be broken or not. That's not something you can do by yourself. You need to do it together with other people. You need people that question the things, and you need people that are really, really clever and know the regulations. But you need to understand it's not just about thinking outside the box. I prefer the term thinking inside the box. And one thing that is also very important, it's not enough to think, because everyone can think. It's not about thinking, it's about thinking and doing. That's what connects all the Nobel Prize laureates. It doesn't matter if they are laureates in literature or in medicine, because a Nobel laureate in literature starts with an idea to write a book, and they actually wrote a book, or plenty of books. Eventually, hopefully, they were nominated, and then they got the Nobel Prize. Same thing with like a Nobel laureate in medicine. It's not enough to have this idea about this cancer treatment. You need to have this idea, you need to execute on the idea. So the Nobel Prize is not about old people coming to Sweden to receiving a golden medallion from the Swedish king. That's fairly boring. The Nobel Prize is about success stories. And that's why 950 Nobel Prize laureates are quite interesting, because then you can start analyzing the data and see, can we see some kind of patterns in what they actually did? How did they manage to come up with the idea? And how did they manage to execute on the idea? Because it's all about execution. Since I'm like a language girl, nerd, and I think that most museums are fairly boring, so I didn't want to create exhibitions when I worked there. So if you ever find yourself in Stockholm, then you can join me. I will show you the museum. The only interesting thing in that museum is actually I painted words on the museum floor. I don't care about artifacts, I care about words. So I painted, for example, persistency on the museum floor. And why is this important? Well, because when I spoke to the Nobel laureates that are coming to Sweden, and I asked them about the creative process, they told me, no, it's not about being the smartest person. It's about persistency. And this is very important to emphasize today. Because today we think everything is moving so fast, so we need to execute super fast, maybe in sprint, maybe you should work in agile teams, and maybe you should see like an end result within like 3 weeks. That's not the case, because if you are targeting complicated things, it takes time. And if you want to be successful, then you need persistence. Persistency is super important, and once again, if you look upon the Nobel laureates, you see people that show great persistency. There is a Nobel laureate in Germany called Harald Suhausen. He was a medical doctor, started with this idea, maybe there is a connection between a specific type of cancer, it was not and the virus, and it was not the coronavirus, some different virus. But when he presented this idea, people were actually laughing at him and said, are you stupid? Can't you remember when you went to med school, you were analyzing like things about cancer and you were studying viruses? Those things, they don't connect. He spent more than 10 years. He became this crazy guy. He was not invited to these kind of conferences. He was not invited to have like great coffee or whatever. He was very lonely, but he went to work every day for more than 10 years. After doing that, he showed up, he had the data. There is a connection between this type of cancer and this virus. They produced a vaccine called Gardasil. You give that to young women and they don't get cancer in the uterus, which is magnificent. And this is also very important to remind yourself about that you need to be very persistent when you are driving things. But if it was only about persistency, then it would be super easy. So when I was working at the museum, I painted so many words on the museum floor. And if someone later on wants a list of all those words, I can give it to you. And because I don't want to end this, I don't want this presentation just to be about words, but I also painted communication. And why is that so important? Well, it's not enough to be smart. If you can't communicate so other people understand what they're doing, you will probably not succeed. And it's not just about communication and persistency, it's hard work, but it's also about having the right contacts, the network, etc., etc. But if you start analyzing people, you will see that people are drawn to similar people. So people that are really good in persistency, they tend to hang around with other persistent people. People that are really good in communication tend to hang around with other people really good in communication. People that works with regulations tend to hang around with other people working in the same industry because you enjoy your own skills and you enjoy people that are similar to yourself. But the problem with only hanging around with yourself is that, and people that are very similar to yourself, is that you miss out on perspectives. So the most important thing that I learned working for the Nobel was something that I was not allowed to paint on the museum floor, and that was collaboration. And that's fairly obvious, because if you start analyzing the Nobel Prize and you will start counting how many of the Nobel Prize laureates received the prize together with others, you will see that the majority of the Nobel Prizes are handed out to 2 or 3 persons each and every year. And that's according to very old rules. You can't give the Nobel Prize to 5 people. Most people, they are not obsessed by the Nobel Prize, so they don't care. So they think, okay, the Nobel Prize in physics, it goes to 3 people, 3 guys maybe, they are super smart and they are really good in physics. But if you dig into this rabbit hole and start analyzing data, you will see it's very common. You have like 2 persons really good in physics working with someone really good in chemistry. Because what the Nobel laureates has managed to do is something that sounds super easy, but it's really, really complicated. They have started working with people that are different from themselves. So if you start analyzing those kind of teams, you will see it's not enough with just collaboration, because if you allow people to choose themselves, they will hang around with similar people. So what we need is also diversity. You need to understand that diversity is not just about being nice. Being nice is a positive by-effect of diversity. It's about bringing more perspectives to the table. So if you start understanding and analyzing science, you will see people are speaking a lot about transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary teams of people targeting the same area, because you need different types of perspective in order to target some of those complicated issues. And I'm so happy because when we start talking about fintech and regtech and or AI, people has understood it's not enough to bring like 2 really smart people in mathematicians in math together. You need to bring other perspectives into this in order to make this work. But why is this so hard? Well, another word that was not allowed to paint on the museum floor was the word trust. And that's a word that I've been obsessed with for like the last 2 years, because I think everything goes back to trust. That's why most collaboration things fail, because we don't trust each other. And all of us sitting in this room, we went to school, we were forced to work in teams with other students and pupils, and they were probably super stupid, so you did all the work yourself. That was not collaboration, that was something else. I'm not sure what it was, but it was not collaboration, because real collaboration, you need different type of perspectives, different qualities, and you need to trust each other. So once again, I said, this sounds very easy, but it's fairly complicated. And speaking about persistency, I lack persistency. I would be like the worst researcher ever, because I get bored within 4 years. I always move and I switch position after 4 years. It doesn't matter what kind of position I have, I quit. So after working for 4 years for the Nobel, I went to the director and I told him, I have all the data, I'm bored, I want to quit. And then he told me, well, you are still doing a good job, so what do you want to do? You know, I'm obsessed with data. I would like to analyze all the Nobel Prize data and see some kind of patterns. And he looked upon me as if I was crazy, and he told me, okay, Tobias, you can do whatever you want to, as long as you do the thing you did before also. So he tricked me into 2 positions and I got paid for 1. So I stayed for another 4 years, but during those last 4 years I was analyzing a lot of data. And does anyone in this room know which is the most successful university in the world when it comes to producing Nobel Prize laureates? Which is the best university in the world? You will not die if you answer incorrectly. I will. It's actually Cambridge, yeah. Because many people tell you, I hear names like Harvard or MIT or Stanford, and they are fairly good. But if you look upon the data and if you analyze it, you will see that Cambridge has 109 out of 950, which is enormous amount. So I went to Cambridge, and I asked them, what are you doing differently? What is the secret sauce? Are you feeding those people something in the morning cereals? Is it something to do with the coffee or tea? What is the secret sauce? And they looked upon me as if I was crazy, and they told me, don't you know that we are 800 years old? When Isaac Newton became professor at Cambridge, we were 400 years old. Those are British people. They have humor. So they told me, we are 800 years ahead of the rest of the world. And let's test you. Does anyone know who said those words? Ideas come from curiosity. No one dares to say something? Who could it be? Yeah, that's incorrect, but you didn't die, so that's good. It's so funny, but 99% people say Albert Einstein. It's not Albert Einstein. It's Walt Disney. And the reason for me squeezing in this Walt Disney quote into this is that, yes, in order to push the envelope, you need to understand it's all about bringing ideas into reality. But to foster that, you need curiosity. And it's not only Nobel Prize laureates that are brilliant. Some people outside the Nobel system who didn't receive a Nobel Prize are also brilliant. Stephen Hawking, we heard this morning, never received the Nobel Prize, brilliant person. But there are so many people who didn't receive a Nobel Prize. And it's not about the Nobel Prize. It's about understanding the power of curiosity. And since I lack persistency, I'm quite curious. So I was really curious, and I had this great conversation with Cambridge. But it's not only Cambridge that has been successful. Because when I started collecting data, I realized it's not only universities that have produced Nobel Prize laureates, there are also private companies. So then I ended up in the United States, and then I ended up at this company called Bell Labs. And this is brilliant, because they were not 800 years old. So in the 1950s, they were supposed to build a new headquarters. So they were traveling around the world. They were visiting Cambridge and Oxford, but also Harvard and MIT. And they said, every university, they make the same mistake, but they can't see it. And what was the mistake the university was making? They were only recruiting researchers. And researchers are great, but most of them are really good in thinking and not so good in executing their ideas. So they understood we need researchers, but we also need doers. We need engineers. And having different buildings, that's fairly stupid. So they actually invited this Finnish architect called Eero Saarinen, who designed this building in the middle of nowhere. This is Jersey. And this is really, really smart, because if you went there, you couldn't escape. And inside this building, they had small labs. And in each and every lab, they threw in maybe 5 researchers and 10 engineers. And they gave them super complicated things and said, please solve this. And Eero Saarinen looks really, really nice and kind, but he's quite mean. So he's designed the building in small labs. And if you wanted to go to the ladies' room or to the men's room, or maybe to have morning coffee, if you were unlucky, you needed to walk for 2 kilometers. It was not very popular, but it was designed on purpose because he wanted people to collide into each other and help each other. Because what they emphasized at the Bell Labs was collaboration. They told, you belong to the same company, so we don't care if you are a researcher or an engineer. You need to help each other. So when you met each other, maybe having coffee, we're asking, what are you doing? We are doing this thing with plastics. Okay, we are sitting in this lab and we're doing something with microchips. What if we combine those things? This became hugely successful. At the end, this company produced everything. They produced the telephones, the CCD sensor, laser, all those tech things that we take for granted today was invented at the Bell Labs. This company became too successful.
they got monopoly. So the United States government didn't like that, so they cut them down. So they still exist today, but they are very, very, very small. And the reason for me telling you the story about Cambridge and the story about the Bell Labs, because today when we speak about innovation or creativity or transformation, no one speaks about those old universities. No one speaks about Bell Labs. Everyone is speaking about those Amazon or Google or Facebook or Apple. And this is very, very interesting because I've been working together with this company, Google, and then people say, oh, those are great people. They are super smart. You see, they have a colorful bicycle stand. If you work for Google, you get free cake every day. If you work for like Google in Zurich, I can tell you, you get free beer. It's not about that free cake, and it's not about the free beer, and it's not about colorful bicycle stand. Because if you manage to lure yourself into this building, you will see they don't care if you are from Sweden, from India, from UK. They don't care if you are like 18 years old or if you are 70 years old. They don't care if you are a boy or a girl or something in between. They realize that everyone in this building are quite clever. Sometimes it's a junior person having a great idea. Sometimes it's a senior person having a great idea. Same thing you can see at the Bell Labs. They didn't care if you were a researcher or engineer. Or actually, at the Cambridge, they don't care if you are a student or the gardener or the professor. You are part of the family. Because it's not about the technology, it's about this. It's finding the right people. Finding the right people and put them together and starting thinking inside the box. So the people is the key. But it's not only people, because it's the combination. It's about combining people with technology. And I'm quite obsessed with technology too. I injected a microchip in my hand, so I collect every data that there is in my hand. I did some crazy stuff about it. And the thing is about collecting data. I remember when I was young, you look fairly same age as me. Do you remember when you bought your first home computer? I remember when my parents bought my first home computer. I was 8 years old. It was 1982. I was really looking forward to this big computer thing because I was young and I heard something about computer games. The computer my father and mother brought home was not a gaming computer. It was a big calculator, like a typewriter. I was very disappointed until I realized if I wanted a game, I needed to do a game myself. I also remember when I stumbled upon internet at the university, it was 1993. And those of you who remember internet 1993, you will remember that was very, very strange and very, very slow. So when I stumbled upon internet in the beginning of the internet era, people didn't know what it would be all about. But more and more people access to this technology, and the technology grow, and more people put information on there, and the technology became cheaper and better. And today people say, well, this computer technology will change, they will transform everything. Everything is going to be connected. You can use all this connectivity, this information, and you will take it and do whatever you want to. People like Elon Musk claims that he will put man on Mars. And then people say, he's a crazy person. That is not going to happen. And I'm not like, I've never met Elon Musk, but I'm quite obsessed with Nobel Prize laureates, and I met plenty of those. So I'm not an expert in Elon Musk's business, but if you compare his business with, for example, Nobel Prize laureates' research, you will see some really interesting things. Because it's not only technology that is transforming, it's also science. 2 years ago, 3 people received the Nobel Prize in Physics, and they came to Stockholm. One of them was actually Arthur Ashkins. He was 96 years old. He's working for the Bell Labs. He's still going to work every day. They got the Nobel Prize for the improvement of lasers. And they told me, when they invented the lasers in the 1960s, it was a big thing. No one wanted to get close to it. 2 of those other people, not Arthur Ashkins, the other guys, and one guy and one girl, they received the Nobel Prize for improvement of lasers, and they built micropulses so they can do eye surgery. So they did this called CPA. But they said, that's quite boring, because they predict that the laser technology next year, or this year, 2020, will be here. And if this is a big thing you don't want to get close to, and this is eye surgery, what is this? And once again, it's so easy because people say, oh, we tried that 5 years ago, it didn't work. Well, things have changed. Technology is changing. We are living in a constant change. So things that used to be impossible is not impossible anymore. You can 3D print human tissue. You can 3D print everything. This is totally going to change the system and society, and we will think it's almost like science fiction. And I wanted to squeeze in this slide because this is my favorite slide. In each and every presentation I do, I always try to squeeze it in because I think it's beautiful. It's about disruption. But since I do a lot of keynote speeches, sometimes I'm invited to meet a lot of smart people like today. A couple of years ago, I was invited to Germany, and I met the biggest hotel chain owners and the founders of the biggest hotel in the world. And I thought it was quite funny because I didn't know what they wanted from me, and they said, we want to pick your brain. And say, well, to tell you something, it's not going to work. Because yes, you can pick my brain, I don't care, but you need more people. You need people with different skills. You need maybe people who know something about regulations. You need some people from the startup industry. You need people from maybe medical doctors. Why are you not recruiting? Why are you not calling to them? And they told me, we don't need those kind of people because those kind of people, they are stupid. And so that's a very dangerous mistake, to think that people outside your own ecosystem are stupid, because it's very seldom that the ecosystem then itself creates the disruption. Disruption often happens of someone outside the ecosystem going into the system and totally disrupt it. It was not the hotel chain that created Airbnb, for example. And the funny thing, they told me that today they realize this is actually a big problem for them, and it's not about those low-quality hotels. It's about 5-star hotels. Because if you go to like a place like London and you stay in this 5-star hotel, you still stand in a bathtub and you pay a lot of money. And if you pay the same amount from Airbnb, you probably get a perfect flat. How are you going to compete with that? And this is not only like the hotel industry. This is broadcasting industry. This is every industry. It's disrupted. And it's not only about business, it's also about, if you look upon society overall. How many of you in this audience were surprised when Donald Trump, for a couple of years ago, became the president of the United States? Most people were. And if you look upon this chart and you think that the liberal forces are maybe in the top and those more conservative forces are in the bottom, none of those politicians hang around with the voters. And then suddenly people started voting for Trump, and then you got, an interesting society. Same thing with Brexit. And we are going to be disrupted over and over and over again if we continuously not expose ourselves to different views of thinking. And there is a very easy way to do this. I use Stockholm in Sweden as my home base, and Sweden and Stockholm is actually a perfect test bed. Because if you look upon Stockholm, it's how many of you have been to Stockholm? Those of you who haven't been to Stockholm, please come to Stockholm. It's a beautiful place. And those of you who have been there before, you can come again, especially in summertime. Because a lot of interesting things are happening in this place right now. You see a lot of smart fintech solutions. You'll see smart regtech solutions. A lot of people come here. And then they tell me, Tobias, what is the secret sauce? Is it those like beautiful like boats or trees or the museums? No, it's not. But most people don't get this, but Stockholm is a capital built upon different islands. It's not about the islands, it's about the bridges. Why is Silicon Valley successful? Because they bridge people. If you go to Silicon Valley, you will end up at the Stanford University. It doesn't matter if you are a student or not, because it's not the traditional university, it's a meeting point. At Stanford, you meet kindergarten children, you meet banking people, you meet students. You combine people, politicians, researchers, industry. Same thing in Sweden. People don't care about titles. If I want to create some kind of tech solution, I just walk over a bridge, I go to the technology university, I grab some smart people, but the problem with those people, they don't know anything about business. then I need to grab those people and to the Stockholm School of Economics, because there are some people that know something about business, but the problem with them is that they don't get to have the funding. So then I need to drag them to like a company. In a time where people are saying we need more walls and more regulations, I said that's not the correct answer. The correct answer for the future is more bridges. It's about finding new type of bridges. But it's not about being totally crazy. Of course you need regulations, but you need to understand it's about thinking inside the box and not outside the box. And I wanted to show you this because I think this is great. I was in Istanbul in this last December, and I was working for this big medtech conference. And I'm really into medtech, medical tech, and educational tech, edtech. And they showed me this because they discovered that the medical system is not working. So they showed me this is the past patient journey. And why is it the past? Because if you look upon how it used to be, it was the diagnosis for a patient happened too late. You had a standard care plan. This became very limited and it became really slow. And it also made it very inconsistent or absent to manage, very slow. And then when they predict how will the future of patients or medicine look like, they showed me this. They said it's all about understanding that the key person in this formula is the human being, the patient. It's not about medical doctors, it's not about the diagnosis, it's about the humans. It's about using the data insights in order to get an early personalized diagnosis. So you can get a personalized care plan. So you get rapid and personal therapies, and you can personalize it. And if you look upon your own industry, most industries, they look like this. But we are leaning towards this. And then people say, well, our industry, it's so different. We can't do anything because there are so many regulations. And I can tell you something. Within the field of medicines, there are also plenty of regulations. It's not about breaking every law there is, but it's about being creative. What can we do about it? Because creativity is not just about sitting around thinking, it's actually about executing things. And those people who dares to take the risk, those are the people that are going to push the envelope. I believe in experimentation. I've been preaching the power of doing testing experiments for many, many years. And when I finally, after 8 years, managed to quit the Nobel Prize Museum because I went to the director once again and he told me, let's give you free works, and I'm not stupid, so I managed to get out of it. I realized that I was not really a good fan of, like, I've never been like smoking and drinking too much, and I realized that some people are doing that, and when they try to quit, they are chewing gums instead of smoking. So I understood I need something to instead of those Nobel Prize laureates. So I searched the market and I stumbled upon something new that I didn't know about before. How many of you have heard about this prize called the IG Nobel Prize? It's a brilliant prize. They invented it at the Harvard University many years ago. It's research that is given to research. It's a prize given to researchers that makes people laugh and then think. And they hand it out once a year. And it's very, very funny. So in 2000, the IG Nobel Prize in physics went to a team of researchers that thought that meetings like this, they are great, but sometimes it's a little bit boring. So it would be a little bit funnier if we had some kind of living creatures flying around in the room. And they really liked frogs, so they said, let's do something. Let's having living frogs levitating in the room. And then people say, no, you can't do that. And I can tell you something, you can. So what they did, they were putting metal in the walls and they fed those frog magnets. And then suddenly you had like living frogs. And then people start laughing or saying, this is not very nice to the frogs, you shouldn't do that. The thing is, when I hear this, I think, oh, this is interesting. What happens if you feed small children or old people magnets? Wouldn't it be funny? And the funny part is one of those people feeding those frog magnets, he showed up in Stockholm 10 years later when I was still working for the Nobel Prize Museum. And what did he do in Stockholm? Well, he was there to collect the real Nobel Prize in physics. And this was a very annoying day for me because at that year in 2010, I was 38, and the youngest person who received the Nobel Prize that year, he was 36 years old. He was 30 years old when he did the discovery. So it was the first time in my life when I met a person who was receiving a Nobel Prize in physics who was younger than me. And I'm quite competitive, so I was not very happy about that. So when I went to work and I met him, he probably saw on my face that I was not very pleased, so he asked me, what's the problem with you? And I told him this story. I'm quite annoyed, I didn't get the Nobel Prize, and you are younger than me, so I feel that I wasted my life. And then he told me, well, the other guy is super old, so you still have like a chance to do something great. But then they said something that got stuck in my mind. They told me that we are really good researchers. But that's not enough, because if you are a good researcher, you get a lot of funding, but you are getting funded to do a lot of boring stuff. That's life. So if you want to do funny stuff, you need to be much more efficient. And maybe you think, I'm 100% efficient. I don't believe that. I think everyone could improve a little bit, and I think that everyone could do 5 days of work in 4 days. That's what they do. They push the envelope. They finish all week's work in 4 days, and on Friday they don't stay at home. They go to their labs and they play around. And one Friday they went into a lab, they saw a piece of carbon, a piece of graphite. They said, let's play around with this. And their colleagues were saying, not again, it's Friday, we know you are playing around, please stop. It's 100% graphite. You will not find anything, please stop. They used Scotch tape, they put that tape on a piece of graphite, they managed the tape to cut layer for layer, and what they did was 1 atom layer of carbon, 1 atom layer of graphite, which is today a new material called graphene. It's the strongest material in the world. If you produce a sewing thread of graphene, it holds 150 kilos. You can fold it any way you want to, and it leads electricity. So today you can build microchips of graphene instead of silicate. They are much smaller and much faster. They are replacing a lot of stuff. And they predict, those researchers, that within like 10 years, a computer will be as thick as a sheet of paper. That paper you can fold any way you want to, put it in your pocket, and when you come home, you just unfold it and you have a great computer. This is brilliant. This is going to change most offices, most universities, most hospitals, most airplanes. Have you heard about this guy called Bill Gates? He's a quite funny person because he's really obsessed with this graphene project, because he's really good in getting a lot of money. And what is Bill Gates pouring money into? He's running this graphene project. What is Bill Gates pouring money into? What does Bill Gates want to do with graphene? What would you do with graphene? If you had the strongest material in the world, you can't break it. What would you produce if you want to have a lot of money?
Car.
Not the car, and not the computer. You need to understand human beings. Condoms. And then people say, this is crazy, but then you need to zoom out, and then you need to understand, what is Bill and Melinda Gates targeting right now? They are targeting HIV in Africa. If they manage to produce like a 1 atom layer thick condom or whatever, it will totally disrupt the business. I met with Samsung and they were showing me those TV screens that are thin as like wallpaper. So I'm looking forward to see what will come first. Is it the condoms or is it like the wallpaper? We don't know. And once again, this is the thing with experiments. We don't know. We need to try those things out. We learn. We can't decide within like 10 years this will happen. We know we need to be persistent. We also need to experiment to see what will happen if we do it like this. André Geim, this guy feeding the frog Magnus and also receiving the Nobel Prize. During the Nobel Gala dinner in Stockholm, he held this in his thank you speech, he said, human progress has always been driven by a sense of adventure and unconventional thinking. We need to explore, we need to push the envelope. And I was really happy about it because I was attending that dinner that year, but then I quit the museum. But last year, when I was analyzing the Nobel Prize stories, because I still do that even if I quit, I was super thrilled because you know the prize in economics, what did it go to? 3 people, and what did those 3 people do? Well, there are 3 people receiving the Nobel Prize in economics for their experimental approach to trying to solve global poverty. So they say it's not enough just to play around with frogs and lower metals. It's about doing experiments. You can't just sit at Harvard having those theories. You need to go out and test them. You need to experiment. You need to collect the data. You need to do something with the data. And you can see more and more researchers and more companies daring to collect the data and do a lot of smart stuff with it. And going back to the quote that we started with this morning, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. I used to believe it was Stephen Hawking, but today I'm not sure. We don't actually know, but I still like those words, and I think they are so correct. It's not just about being super smart, it's also adapting to change. But the problem with this word change is that people fear change. They fear what they don't know anything about. So today, I try to avoid the word change. I have replaced the word change with the word of improvement. Because if you ask people, do you want to be part of change? People will tell you, no, I'm quite good. But they say, do you think we can improve this in some way? People say, yeah, we could. And I believe everything out there can be improved. I remember when I met my wife many years ago, she told me in the beginning of our relationship, Tobias, you are never ever satisfied. And that's correct, because when she told me, I was very disappointed because I thought she was mean. Today, I know she's not mean, she's very correct and smart. I totally believe everything can be improved. And I think that this is how we should, in this time of constant change, we shouldn't just look upon it as change, we should see this as an opportunity to improve stuff. It's a different way of thinking, and everything out there can be and should be improved. It's good today, but it's not perfect. Let's try to make things better. So when I was quitting the Nobel Prize Museum, those of you who haven't been to the museum, you can go there and you can check out those words on the museum floor. They are quite funny, but there is another funny things in that museum, because if you go there and you go and have some coffee or tea in the cafeteria, you can turn the chairs upside down, because they wanted to be a little bit outside the box, a little bit crazy. So they have these autographs. The Nobel Museum guest book for the Nobel laureates are underneath the chairs. And this was a crazy idea. So when I was working there, they needed someone to tell the Nobel laureates you should sign your name under a chair. And no one else wanted to do that. So that became my responsibility. And sometimes when people give me responsibility, they don't think. So I was responsible for this. And one year, a Nobel laureate asked me, am I allowed to write something else when I've written my name? And I said, you can do whatever you want to. You are a Nobel laureate. And those of you who are still like an employee, be very careful, because this can make you can get fired. I was not fired. I was not allowed to attend this ceremony anymore. But today, I personally only visit the museum once a year. And I'm only curious about, have the Nobel laureate written something underneath the chairs? And since I'm not there, not every year people are telling that they should. So sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. This is an example. In 2017, Nobel laureate in chemistry, Richard Henderson, he got the Nobel Prize for the improvement of cryo-electronic microscope. He wrote, time consists of past, present, and future. Of these, future is the most interesting. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm obsessed with words and I'm quite good in grammatical structures. And I guess that you all went to school and you have some like basic teaching in grammatical structures and grammar. And you were probably taught that the future is a noun, which is incorrect. The future doesn't just happen. The future is created. And if something is created, then the future is a verb. And if the future is a verb, you have two choices. You can do nothing. Then someone else will create your future. Or you roll up your sleeves, start working, and then you become part of creating the future. You can decide yourself, do you want to be in the driving seat or do you want someone else to drive you around? And I think that the people today are allowed to choose. They prefer to decide themselves. So we need to push things. And to push your brains in this late afternoon, I would say, this is how I view the past, present, and future. This, for me, is the past. This is the lonely genius, Albert Einstein. I love Albert Einstein. But the problem with Albert Einstein is, yes, he was a genius, but he was not lonely. Remember the first picture I showed you, the most intelligent photo? He was attending conferences. He was not sitting alone in this room having this spark from God. He was exposing himself to other people. He was attending conferences. He loved to hang around with people outside the fields of mathematics and physics. That's how he learned. That's why he was brilliant. He was super smart, but he also worked with other people. And there are some brilliant people out there, but they are very few. And every year there are some new person born. But all those lonely geniuses, they will not be enough. So we need more people, not less, that push the envelope. So I'm so happy to see that more and more companies start to understand this. This is a company that Google gave me. They gathered their staff. They worked for 78 hours. They prototyped. They ate pizza and drank sodas. And what did they come up with after 78 hours? The prototype of Gmail. Fairly successful. Not one person, a group of people going together, solving a problem, thinking inside the box. But once again, this is a problem for me because I believe in collaboration, but I also believe to create successful collaboration things, you need diversity and trust. And I don't think that most people will trust 2,000 other people, and maybe you don't trust people working for Google. So this is just the present. The future will look like this. And now you think I'm totally crazy. This is our robots, and they are toy robots called combiners or transformers. Those of you who are a little bit nerdy like me, you know that within this robot universe, there are some transformer robots called combiners. And those robots can form huge teams. So someone becomes the leg, and someone is the torso, and someone is the head. When they form those huge robots, no one can beat them. In the films, please stay away from them. They are not very good. The head has a big ego and wants to shoot. I think you get the metaphor. It's about bringing people in with different skill sets, sharing the same purpose, and pushing the envelope. It's not just about AI and robots, it's about you people in this room connecting with each other. Because if you want to be successful, there are some things you can do. One of the words that I painted on the museum floor was networks. In Swedish, that's nätverk, networks. Networks is super important. If you want to be successful and if you want to harvest and get more ideas, you should connect with others. And people tend to misunderstand networks because networks is not transactions. The more you give in a network, the more you get back. This is brilliant. If you have 2 phones, you get 1 connection. But you have 5 phones, you can have 10 connections. If you have 12 phones, you can get 66 connections. So if I give something to you, I don't necessarily need to get something back. You give it to someone else. And then you gain trust because you become someone that are putting data into the system. And once again, this is a golden opportunity. We are here all today. You have this fantastic app. Please take this opportunity to connect with each and every person in this room because you never know. If someone, you look fairly young, maybe you will receive a Nobel Prize, then you can get some money, hopefully. Or they can write something about you underneath the shares. Or maybe it's not about the Nobel Prize, it's about pushing the envelope. And I guess that there are a lot of smart people in this room. If you start connecting with each other, then magic can be done. And if someone, for any reason, wants to connect with me or have any kind of questions afterwards this, you can send me like an email or connect to me on LinkedIn. I believe in pushing things to the next level. And I think that it's not the startup industry that should push your industry. You should push it because you have the knowledge. But in order to do that, you need to understand on how to connect all the data. Thank you. On time.